Hey everybody, welcome back to the semi-complete guide to PyQt6. We're just getting started here. We're going to make a basic app. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the most basic types of layout for an app and how to get text onto a screen, how to get user input, and have a button that actually does something when you click it. So go ahead and open up your project in VS Code. Go to the basic app. So in case you didn't know, it's under the guide to PyQt6 under widgets basic app. So go take a look at that. We have some to-dos here and I'm going to kind of walk you through each step along the way. When we have a basic app, anything that we want to use in our app, any kind of widget or layout, we're going to need to import those. And so let's go ahead and run this as is so you can kind of see basic app. It says basic app on here, simple greeting app. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close this. It's good for you to see that. And already we're using the Q application, Q label, Q main window, and all of these so far. But what we haven't done, which we will be using, which is why I've included these, are the QLineEdit and the QPushButton. Okay. So we got to make sure anything we have that we're going to use, we're going to import. The class main window that you see here is basically the blueprint for our full window, our app. In it is this going to be, this is the code that actually constructs or builds our window. And for now, you can see some of these things make a little bit of sense. There's a window title, says basic app. In fact, let's go ahead and run this. We can kind of take a look at the app as we go through this. So there's the window title. That's what appears up at the top there. You'll notice in quotes, we wrote basic app. Contents margin puts a little space around everything inside of the window. That's for what's in here. Resize lets you change the size of the screen. If we want to make it wider, we can make this number bigger. So let's go ahead and change it from 320 to 420 by 320. And before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and get this app open. Down here at the bottom, you see this right here? That's the basic app. This is that screen I had from before. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And so one of the things that you may want to do is I just want to show you what happens. So we've made some changes in VS Code. You see how there's this white dot there? When I hover over it, turns to an X. That white dot means there have been some changes. So I changed the resize. So in order to run this again, I'm going to hit run. Now watch what happens. In a way, nothing quite happens. This still looks the same. But what we need to do is close this window. Now watch what happens when I close it. It pops back open now with the new size. So we just resized it. So that can be a little annoying. And so one of the things that I like to do, I like to close this. I like to run this in debug. And I'll show you what I mean. So in this little, over on the left-hand side, you'll see this little bug here. I'm going to click Run and Debug. And it's going to run the Python debugger. And I want to just click Python file. And it should pop open. Okay, so it pops open, right? And as you can see here, we can stop this. If I hit stop, that window goes away. I'm going to run and debug again. Windows up. So let's go ahead and play around with this resize. Let's make this 820. Now, instead of clicking down here, closing it, or rerunning it, I'm just going to hit the refresh button. And what that does is it reruns it with the new changes. So now it's a lot wider. And then let's make it a lot taller. So I'm going to change that to 840. I'm going to run it again. And now it just reruns. We got a big screen here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Debug is a great way to make little changes and kind of see as you go just by hitting that rerun. So I'm going to undo this and go back to the original settings we had from before. And what I recommend you do from here on out is let's start working on actually building out the app, and I'll explain as we go. So the first thing I recommend you do is that if you've made any changes, you want to undo. If you look over here, there's the source control, and it shows some changes that have been made. I'm going to hit save. Hopefully that goes away. Okay, great. What I don't want to do is I don't want to have any commits or any changes from here. If we're going to do the git, like I said, if you don't have terminal open, let me just remind you, you want to click on this little thing here, go to terminal, and I'm just going to do new terminal. And then from here, I'm going to do a git branch, and I should be on the main branch. And remember last time we talked about creating a learning branch, so I'm going to check out the learning branch. I'm going to do git checkout learning. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a layout for the entire app. So we're calling it layout, and this is a vertical box layout. Vertical box layout just puts widgets from top to bottom. So the first thing we add is a title label, and it's a Q label. So when you create a label, you can just, in the quotes, you can just put what you want the label to say. If your label is going to be long and you're going to have the words wrap, you may want to create a variable ahead of time. So let me show you what you could do here. I'm just going to cut this. I'm going to right click and cut. And then in the future, I'll be using keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to just put on here title equals, and I'm going to paste in there. And then you can just insert the variable here. Okay, so we're going to add a text input for the user's name. But before we do that, let me just walk you through what happens here when we run this. And I'm going to go ahead and do this in debug mode. So I'm going to do run and debug. And interesting, C is not a command. Huh. Okay, well, I'm just going to ignore that. So we have the basic app here, and you'll notice there is that title label. How do we get the title label into the screen? Well, let's scroll down and take a look. And remember earlier we created this layout. It's a QVBox layout. So your layout, anything that's a layout, can add widgets to it. So a vertical box layout, we can add widgets. So we added the title label here. There's a thing called stretch, and if we don't have stretch, nothing gets moved up. Let me comment this out to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to hit refresh. And now that I hit refresh, the basic app is stuck right in the dead center right here. So if you don't add a stretch, it's just going to vertically align everything in your layout. And I don't like to do that. I like everything to go to the top, so we add a stretch to the layout. Then we create this widget. It's a Q widget. It's just a generic widget. And we set the layout of this widget to be the layout. And then finally, we create what's called the central widget, and we just add the widget here. You don't have to do anything to it. I just wanted you to see what happens. And then down here, we have this app equals Q application, and then window equals main window, window.show app.exe. We have this in the if name is equal to main, and all that means is that if we want to run our app directly from here, which is what we did, this code gets run. If you want to create other windows or other widgets as separate files and import them, when you import a file into the window, it won't run any of the code in here. This code is only run when we run this Python file directly. So when I hit refresh, we do that. There we go. And now we got our app back. Great. So everything's up at the top. For this next segment, I'm just going to do this in fast motion, and then I'll explain what I did afterward. So as you can see, I added two different widgets, a label and a QLineEdit. To create them, I gave them names. I usually like to give a similar name. If it's related to name, for example, I write name and then underscore and then what it is. So this is a label and this is a type of input. I keep that variable name a little generic. And it's pretty straightforward. It looks very similar to what we did with the QLabel before in the QVBox layout, only we've added this QLineEdit. Now, if you look at the app, you can see that your name is above and the input is below. That's because we've stuck both of these widgets into our layout, which is a vertical box layout, which means they're just one on top of another. You cannot put them side to side. If we want to do that, we need to add a horizontal box layout, and we'll add those two widgets to the horizontal box, and then we'll add the layout to it. In order to do that, though, we're going to need a name layout. So we're just going to go ahead and type name layout, and we're going to set that to a QHBoxLayout. But if you notice, there is no HBox layout. It is underlined. It doesn't recognize it. That's because we haven't imported it yet. we need to add that as an import. So you have the QVBox layout. Let's add our QHBox layout, add a comma, run it. So now that we have our horizontal box, we're going to add those to the layout. So we're going to add them up here. Name, layout. I'm going to put an add widget, and we're going to add the name label. Now notice how I just type NL, that's name layout, name label, and if I add a B, as long as they're in from beginning to end and you hit these letters, it actually can find it. I love that little aspect there. It's going to really save you time if you get used to using it that way. And it's still the name layout, and so I just run it that way, and it's another add widget, and then it's name input. Go ahead and run it there. So we've added these two widgets to the name layout, so we don't need to add those here. So what we're going to do is get rid of that. We're going to add a layout, and here it's going to be the name layout. And let's rerun it, and now you'll see the difference. There you go. All right, so that's what the horizontal box is. And so if you're going to do a very basic app, you may want to combine the two different types of layouts. Horizontal box, vertical box. Anything you want things side by side, you stick them in a horizontal box. You should give everything a really good and clear and easy to remember name and follow a very consistent naming convention like how I did here. All of these begin with name. There's a name label, a name input, a name layout. And then it becomes more clear what we did in our app. Also, I think it's good to keep these comments here. They sort of tell us what we did. If you're done doing the to-do list, you can just get rid of the word to-do, and now it just says add a text input for user's name. All right, so let's do the next section, adding a push button and a label. Let's also do that in fast motion. Okay, all of our widgets in place. We just now have to program it to actually capture the user's input and modify this label below. A couple things you want to know that's going to be very important is anything that we want available, anything we want to control or program, if we want to capture information from a widget or we want to change the widget's text, we're going to need a self in front of it, a self dot in front of it. And we're going to take advantage of find and replace for this. So the first thing we need is we want to make sure that we can capture the name input. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a Control H, which is name input. Let me just copy this real quick, and I'm going to paste that. Otherwise, I'm going to accidentally rename it the wrong thing. So instead of just name input, we're going to have a self dot in front of that. All right, and then I'm going to replace all. You'll see in a moment what this looks like. And let's do the same thing for our greeting label. So I'm going to do Control H, and that will be a self.greeting label. And we'll replace all. And so once we have that, we can go ahead and remove the to-dos. And what we want to do is we want to have our button have a method attached to it. Just like we have the init method, that's also known as a constructor or initializer method, and it's something that our window can do. We want something the button can do, so we're going to give it its own method, and it's going to be, we're just going to call it greet user. So we're going to start with the greet button, and we're going to hit a dot, and what we want to do is when the button is clicked, we are going to hit a dot, and we're going to connect it to a method that we are going to create, which will also need a self in front of it. I'm going to put self.greet_user. Now, it doesn't recognize this yet because we haven't created it. So we're doing a little egg before the chicken. And let's go ahead and create the proverbial chicken by creating a method called greetUser. Now, whenever you do a self.greet and you're using it as a method, a couple things you want to do is the self goes in the parentheses when you define it. The other thing I want to point out is that even though we're calling a function, and notice that when I hover, it says it's a function, you don't put parentheses in here. Sometimes you would be tempted to do that, but it actually, the way this works, it's not going to work. So let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go over here, hit enter, def, I'm going to paste greet user, and I'm going to write self right there. And the reason why is that when we greet the user, we need our widget. So we're sending it the widget's self. And then we're going to do a self dot, and then suddenly everything up here that we had available, like name input, is now available. And okay, so we can actually access that in the greet user. Okay, so on the name input, what we're going to do is we're going to capture that. So I'm going to talk name equals self dot name input dot, and it's text. Now later on, later tutorials, I'll go over some of the different methods, because one of the things you're going to find out is this is a QLineEdit. Not all widgets have .text. Each one has its own, and that's one of the reasons why this is going to be a long series, is because it's hard to kind of get to know each of these. You have to be a little patient. I'll show you some places that you can, where you can find the answers, or you can just stay tuned for my later tutorials. We're going to have a new variable, call it greeting, and we're going to use the F string, and we're going to just say welcome. And then we're going to put this little curly bracket here, and we're going to insert the value of name right in there. All right, do a little welcome, okay? So that's going to build that. And then what we want to do now is do the self.greeting label. And that greeting label, we're going to set its text to be greeting. All right, we'll run this in debug mode like we've been doing. Let's go ahead and close that. We're done using that. And click run and debug. Opens it up. What's my name? 100 Visions guy. Click greet user. All right, there we are. Okay, so let's watch what happens here. So we're here. We got local self. I'm going to go down. Name. There it is. So name, it's captured the input text. And then we create our greeting. And there it is. You can see that. And let's just go here. And before we do the next step, you'll notice, there it is. I'm going to hit enter. And run it again. And there it is. Welcome 100 Visions Guide to my awesome app of awesomeness. One thing you're going to want to do, and this is going to be very important because it's going to get frustrating, is add word wrap onto your label. So because the user might have a very long name. So the greet label, let's do this right here. I'm going to put the self.greeting label dot set word wrap, and then we're going to set it to be true. So that way, if our text gets really long, it will do it. Okay. So at this point, it works, and I want to just talk about your challenge. Oh, I keep hitting run again when I mean to debug. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the challenge, because I'm going to post this solution here, and I'll also include the solution to these challenges. So what are the challenges? See if you can add another text input, QLineEdit, just like we did here. It would have to be different, and it could be last name, hometown, or some other piece of information you'd like to know. And then add an extra button next to the greet button and have it say clear, that when you click it, it will clear the text that was in the name input and reset the output text to its initial value. You're going to want to create a variable for the initial value of the greeting. And if you set it in here and add a self in front of it, so you could have self.greeting equals, or self.instruction, give it that name, and then you insert the variable here, And then when you hit the clear button, you can just set the label on the greeting label to be that variable that never changes. It'll have that information in there. And one other thing you might want to try out, let me get rid of that, is you might want to take your input, and there's a thing called placeholder text. So it's self.name input.placeholder text, or set placeholder text. And then what you can do here is you can just add a string, which will be sort of just like a dummy text that's sitting in there. So I'll just put hello and run it so you can see what that looks like. See, it says hello, it's faint. It's actually not the text that's in there. It's just like a little placeholder to give a hint as to what you might type in there. So consider doing that as well. So all of that will be posted on GitHub under the Solutions branch. So if you're watching this video, the Solutions branch is already there, but try your best to do it first and then check to see how your code compares to mine. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.